I would like to welcome everyone to the next episode of the Unido Talks podcast. We aim to deliver a high-quality experience for our listeners and guests. Together, we explore a range of topics in the SME sector that are disruptive to the status quo, thought-provoking, and boundary-pushing when it comes to blockchain technology. I'm so excited to have our guests Michael Swan and Joel Neidig here today with us. Joel Neidig is a serial entrepreneur. He's developed over 65 manufacturing apps on the Google Play App Store, which have been downloaded over 500,000 times. Joel Neidig sits on the Technical Advisory Committee for the Digital Manufacturing and Design Innovation Institute. He's been a Darpa recipient. And have I missed anything else, Joel? I think I probably missed something there.
Oh, no, that's great. Thank you.
And then we have, of course, as many of our Unidoers know, we have Michael Swan, who's a crypto venture capitalist, the chief commercial officer of Pack Blockchain, and one of our co-founders here at Unido. A former Goldman Sachs vice president, Michael brings a wealth of corporate and institutional transactional experience into the digital asset domain. Thank you both for being here. I'm so glad to have you guys, and I'm looking forward to this podcast.
Thanks, Joe.
I'd like to start off, Joel, could you tell us a little bit about your manufacturing experience? I know that your family has worked in manufacturing for quite some time with Itamco. How has that been, and what about manufacturing has led you to blockchain?
Oh, sure, yeah. And one quick disclaimer, I got the disclaimer you always got to put out. So the views and opinions expressed are my own and do not reflect the views of Symbichain, its affiliates, or employees. So just wanted to get the old disclaimer out there. But so my family started a manufacturing company back in 1955. So my grandfather and great uncle, kind of came out of my great uncle. It was during World War II. Was actually working on the Manhattan Project, believe it or not, and mostly in the tool and die space, different fabrications and things like that, it's been a great experience. I learned a lot, from and gotten to partake in like all of the different aspects of business when it comes to quality, logistics, supply chain, maintenance and operations, and then the overall business side of being able to finance a business over so many different years because when we were in the crypto space, the business it's flying fast and different things like that. But building sustainable businesses that aren't really bought and sold, you're really focused on that cash flow and keeping that going for a long period of time. And with Itamco, it's been over 60 years. So that's really and you have very highs and lows, and being able to sustain over different market macroeconomics is complicated. So I've really learned a lot, and then out of that, spun up multiple companies, exited one, and then now with Symbichain. So it's been really exciting.
Now, at Itamco, what were the problems within the supply chain or manufacturing that you saw that led you to start Symbichain? Like, where were the problems there that blockchain solved for?
Sure, yeah. What we've originally had focused on was when we won our Darpa award. DARPA had put out a secure messaging application, and they wanted to build it on blockchain. As many aren't familiar with DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency that invented the internet. They invented autonomous vehicles and different things like that. So lots of amazing technology has come out of DARPA. And we realized, my co-founder, Dr. Ian Taylor from the University of Notre Dame, Itamco and Notre Dame got together, and we realized it was really difficult to build these, multiple blockchain applications, make them really user-friendly. And so we had built this auto-generated API. And one of the things that we were trying to solve in the business world from a supply chain standpoint, what Itamco saw was is on that payment system. So EDI, electronic data interchange, is very old and convoluted, and being able to use smart contracts to essentially be able to do purchase orders, invoices, supply chain, like track and trace, those different things was really powerful. And so that's where the company started out of, and in supply chain and various things. And now we've kind of we've obviously scaled into NFTs and other things.
Could you tell us a little bit how you've implemented NFTs into SymbiChain and the use case there?
Sure. There's several different use cases. We can start with some of the digital ones first. So recently announced Lost in Oz, which is a Amazon Prime, great kids show on Amazon Prime. My kids love it. And they are going to be releasing what's called the Passport to Oz, and being able to have fans have a more integrated experience with the show and purchase NFTs, being able to do different things with those NFTs in the with the Lost in Oz series. And they're going to be raising more funds for their next season and shows. So that's really exciting. And but digitizing that and having an experience with the show is very unique, and they're really thought leaders in that space. The other one in the supply chain world is Kemper Snowboard. So we're actually working with Kemper with digital NFTs, but also with selling physical snowboards and tying those NFTs to have the authenticity of those snowboards. So it's pretty exciting, and there's a lot going on. We also have the International Field Hockey Association, and working with them. There's actually, I didn't realize field hockey had 2 billion fans. So they're the third largest sport in the world. So it's so those are just some announcements that we have, and then we also have the Bruges, which is a Champions League team in Belgium that's launching NFTs too. So we have a wide variety of NFTs capabilities, both digital and physical, that we help companies and organizations monetize. That's really what we are making user experience and everything really friendly for their users.
I want to talk a little bit about the DARPA. Was it a grant or is it the DARPA contract? I guess it's a DARPA contract.
So it was a it was a contract. So it was a competed contract. There were, I think, 100 companies that went after it, organizations. There were only 10 that were selected, so we were in the top 10. And then we went on to work with DARPA, and everybody kind of built specific solutions. But out of that, that's what SymbiChain, that's what kicked SymbiChain off. So me and my co-founder, Dr. Ian Taylor, hey, let's go build this company. I was the CEO at the time. Since then, we've hired an executive management team, and they're doing amazing. And so I'm focused really on some specific projects.
So it was
now
getting the DARPA,
getting
the contract sort of spawned SymbiChain, so to speak.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
It made us realize how difficult it was to build. We were building
back then it was Hyperledger Fabric and Sawtooth and then also Ethereum, and it was and all those they didn't Ethereum was standardized on Solidity, but Hyperledger Fabric was Go and some other pieces of technology that you had to piece together. So it was really complicated, and we wanted to auto generate an API just like Stripe would, for a payment system, and that's what we've done. So we got about 10 different blockchains that we support now, and a variety
awesome.
of layer 2s. So layer 2 has been really powerful too to get more adoption.
Michael, I have a question for you real quick. I want to hear, because I don't think on our Unido podcast we've ever really talked about your background at Goldman Sachs, which I find really fascinating. It's one of the biggest legacy financial firms in the banking system. What was it that made you want to leave the banking sector and start your own blockchain at Unido?
So Goldman's is a very interesting business. It's known for its M&A and its IPOs, and it's known as a merchant bank. It runs its investing funds. What it is at the end of the day is a group of very smart people and capital It very much is financial services, and you look at the things that they invest in, and these are usually very successful businesses. But you sit on the outside, and what I'm really looking for, and I suppose this ties in with what Joel has been doing for his career, is a technology which just transcends just wealth transfer. In its inception of crypto with Bitcoin, it is just a wealth transfer mechanism at the end of the day. Then you look at things like smart contracts, Ethereum, and then all the various other blockchains that are coming through now. There's so much more than just wealth transfer, right? There's things to do with wealth.
Right.
You've got your margin lending or your DeFi, we'll call them DeFi protocols. But even beyond that, just industrial use cases for blockchain. Joel's just rattled through a few that his own work is doing, but if you think about what's being done out there, carbon emissions trading and reporting, tracking of logistics, we're looking at projects for NFTing seats on airlines, where the economics of the seat can be tradable 5 times between wheels up and wheels down again. I think the technology, and I'm going to say ecosystems, but really the industry, is so much more than just finance. Finance version 2, sure, it's finance version 2. I think everyone on this chat would agree with that. But it's so much more, and it's so much more integrated, and that's the exciting stuff, right? The things where you can, you could record voting for an election on a blockchain, for instance, for perfect transparency. And then you link the marketplace and the marketable elements, the value of records, and if it's done all on a blockchain, you can achieve fantastic levels of efficiency. And I think if you keep looking for how to develop new things, they need to be efficient, they need to be integrated. Well, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? So that's one here.
So what were your aha moments when you were both discovering blockchain? Was it who got to you, right? Was it one thought leader? Was it a YouTube video? Joel, I'll ask you this first. When was your aha moment, the light bulb turned on about blockchain?
I think it was when I first heard Andreas, and I can't even say his last name, but it's on top. Anyway, but if you Google Andreas and you hear about his Bitcoin conversations, he is amazing. Like when he talks about, what Bitcoin is and the security around it and things like that. And so, and I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist at all, but I feel like it brought so much technology, and I think it inspired Vitalik and Joe Lubin and all the others to. And Charles and Gavin Wood to really think about what's possible when you have a ledger, like Michael was just saying, and what's the power in having that where everybody can see and easily come to consensus. And now there's it opens up all kinds of different things and disintermediation and things like that. So now and then that opens up great things for businesses. And connectivity in a global world that we live in. So
right. And Michael, for you, what was your aha moment that made you start Unido, that made you realize that blockchain was the future?
Look, I got into crypto despite what I just said about it being beyond wealth transfer and payment technology, because of my experiences with payment technologies. I had to pay a lawyer fee in the British Virgin Islands, and they wanted a SWIFT transfer. To go to BVI, you need to go via the US, then Puerto Rico down to BVI. I went to the largest commercial bank in Australia and asked them to do a multi-leg SWIFT transfer, and they said they don't do those because there's inherent risks of money jumping from bank to bank to bank, that the money goes missing. And I thought, well, these are professional organisations, they've got billions of dollars of infrastructure behind them recording transfers. How on earth could money go missing? And frankly, if their systems can't keep up with it, that's not my problem. But it is my problem because they won't do my transfer for me. So it's a very practical issue.
If the money never shows up, it becomes your problem.
it becomes my problem that they simply won't do it. So I was in a position thinking, well, how am I going to pay this bill? This is relevant to the business at the time I was dealing with. How on earth do we do a global business? And then looking at solutions, and this was 5 years ago when I really started to pay attention. I was very late to crypto. The technology and what it provides for covers these things because it's uniform. It doesn't require intermediaries that are willing to deal with each other. There's no trust or risk element because everything's perfectly recorded. It all made a lot of sense. Now, the adoption still wasn't there, and you had to look forward and believe the use case and that it will come through. But it seems so obvious it solves a lot of the issues. It's one ubiquitous system. It doesn't rely on certain people willing to do things. It was just straightforward. And it's efficient and cheap. So it made a lot of sense. And I think I was willing to ride it out because I believe that all those things making sense for my problem, I'm not the only person with this problem.
You experienced the problem firsthand, more or less, the inertia within the legacy system itself.
Yeah. And I live in Australia. It's a very well-banked nation, right? You can only imagine in second and third world countries where they are not well-banked, what problems they have, and how are people being kept behind who are industrious or have fantastic ideas? How are they going to launch business? How are they going to take it global when they can't be paid? There's a problem existing for me in Australia. This problem exists elsewhere. I'm certain of that, and we've seen it. We've been
absolutely.
We've spoken to people firsthand.
I want to discuss a little bit about L2s. Joel, you mentioned earlier that you were going to deploy dApps on L2s. Recently, Vitalik Buterin said he sees the future of blockchain heading to a multi-chain world, but not a cross-chain world. He cited an inherent security risk that exists within bridges. I know Simba and Unido both have native tokens on Ethereum and also offer wrapped versions on other chains. Do you see a consolidation of layer 1s that eventually build on layer 2 solutions, or do you see a world where layer 1s become interoperable? Joel, I'll ask you first. Where do you see layer 2s going?
Yeah. Sure. And once again, this is just my opinion. But and also Simba we do not have a token. Just we mint on all different kinds of chains and then use those whatever's minted to do those kind of different transfers. So we use the Polygon or we use Ethereum or whatnot. But we're really using. All of our use cases are really geared more towards the rollups, the ZK rollups, and the optimistic that kind of way, because we have a strategic partnership with Polygon. So just to be in disclosure, so why do we do that? Because a lot of our users don't need that immediate Ethereum. It ties back to Ethereum, but they don't need that immediate. Like they're fine with the size of transfer they're doing with Polygon that they can, eventually anchor back to Ethereum. But they don't need that immediate kind of thing because they're not doing hundreds of millions of dollars or something like that. They're just really focused on, and there's also like crazy gas fees as we've seen recently with Bored Apes, but and the other side. But yeah, that's really where we're focused on is a lot of the layer 2s and bridging that capability. We are working on things that kind of have a little bit more sophistication on that cross-chain capability. I won't get into it now, but that's definitely coming down, and it's really exciting to see. I think a lot of people like Polkadot and Cosmos and are working on these kind of. It's really complicated when you go cross chain, but I do think that in the I guess the intermediate area, you're going to see a lot of layer 2 happen that will provide a lot of adoption, as opposed to just going to the mainnet Ethereum.
Michael, same question for you. Do you see a world where layer 1s are becoming interoperable with each other, or do you just see a multi-chain world where different layer 1s and layer 2s serve different purposes, but maybe they're not exactly talking to each other?
Look, probably the latter. As everyone knows, I'm not a technologist, so I won't speculate into how easy or difficult it is to make them naturally interoperable. I'm guessing it's not easy. What I am guessing is people want to use different chains for different reasons. There's gas fees, there's inherent liquidity on certain chains more than there are others, there's transaction speeds. So people will gravitate to a chain that works for their type of transaction. If you're doing a couple of $50 transactions, you're going to do that on Polygon instead of Ethereum, if you have a choice in the matter. So then things like bridges or other, clever ways of wrapping tokens are always going to be in need. So I, without knowing the technical background of how difficult it is, but I gather from the sentiment of people I speak to, it is difficult. I suspect there will be these clever bridge solutions. I'm saying bridge very broadly, how they affect the interoperability I won't comment on, but things to bridge value across from one chain to another. I think they'll stay in vogue for quite some time, because at the end of the day, it is a consumer market, and certain chains will be more suitable for other people, and the underlying asset being traded should be ubiquitous across all, so they need to be transportable. I suspect it'll be through bridging and layer 2 apps rather than proper chain interoperability.
Okay, let's take the discussion focus more towards small and medium enterprises, since that's what both of your chains are really looking to help out in. Joel, when it comes to Simba Chain, are SMEs reluctant to think that blockchain technology solves for their current problems? Are you getting any pushback from suppliers or your clients or customers, or are people naturally gravitating towards blockchain use?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a mixed bag. I mean, there's like obviously the early adopters and the emerging technology groups that really want to start getting things going, but there is kind of this old Web 2 kind of approach to things, but it's also the people that like there's no other way to do it, and that's where Web 3 really comes into play. So we've got a lot of amazing customers that have they want that kind of capability into their business process, and it's not always easy. Exactly, yeah. There's definitely pushback in different groups, and I think it's all about making the user experience better, making better UIs. What is it solving that you can't solve with blockchain? And we have a 4-question document that's like on our website, and it's like, do you need blockchain or not? And so that's like the first litmus test that they have to go through about. Is there multiple stakeholders? Is there more than one truth of authority? Are you tracking a digital and physical asset? And so all those different things they have to kind of check. There's just 4 questions. It's really simplistic, but they have to check all those boxes, because otherwise it may not be just done without blockchain.
Right.
Yeah.
It may not be fully applicable depending on the use case of some customers or clients.
But
that makes sense.
NFTs really, I know NFTs are kind of like, that's been a lot of craziness going on, but I think that that NFTs have provided, like, given smart contracts a name, and so people are like, oh wow, I can do this with a smart contract thing. So that's been very helpful from that standpoint from the industry.
That makes a lot of sense. Michael, how about for you? When it comes to SMEs and the fintech space, or just SMEs wanting to hold custody of their digital assets, are you having any pushback from companies or potential clients of crypto adoption, or are they, because there's not really regulation around stablecoins yet? I would imagine maybe some people are a little nervous about entering this space right now. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so there's a few points, and this typically just comes down to education. if you look at the world of what folks could be doing with blockchain, it's not just do you want some capital exposure to Bitcoin or something like that as a new alternate asset class, and it's not just accepting payments in crypto for services you do. It's all the stuff that Joel's talked about. You can have, on a balance sheet, you have various assets. Now, some of those assets are records on a database, tracking of inventory, for instance. These can be done on a digital basis, and they're your assets. And if you think about the scope of what you can blockchainify, for lack of a better word, within a business, I think it would be stuff more than just payment technologies for a business. But I don't think, because it is new and it is a bit scary for folks that, haven't gone down the rabbit hole like we all have, I don't think businesses necessarily sit down and think about the scope of what they can do. And because it lives outside of a business, you're not putting servers in a room that you control or you rent. The nature of custody, of holding what that is and the right to transact with it, is new, and it is scary. And I mean, that's the whole point of Unido, making the custody your right to the blockchain for your wallet, to make it simple, effective and secure. These things are scary because it's away from the norm of a business holding assets. Well, they physically own them in a room. Inventory sits in a warehouse, right? The idea of inventory sitting on a blockchain distributed amongst thousands of computers of people you've never met before, that can be frightening, and people haven't thought, well, how do I manage that? And that's the education path I think we need to go down with the SMEs, that these are digital assets, they are absolutely tangible and they're absolutely marketable. It's how you manage them, how you secure them, and how you manage them the same as any other asset you might have. Hard asset and plant, excavation equipment, it's assets on a balance sheet. You secure it because you have the keys and it sits in a warehouse or a yard. Similar thing with digital assets. It's just because it is so far from what you think about natural assets or legacy assets, shall we say. I think there's just an apprehension, and this is just an education process. Unfortunately, it is a long education process because we're really shifting the paradigm here. These things take time. They take decades, right?
We may be educating for the next 10 years over this.
Yeah. These podcasts are going to go
maybe
for a while.
10 more years of teaching people.
It's education at the end of the day. There's so much more beyond having crypto for the sake of facilitating payments, or you want a bit of Bitcoin exposure for your balance sheet. That's such a small element, and it's very well catered for right this second. What about every other asset that could be digitized in a business and made efficient and liquid? These are the things that I think the majority of businesses aren't even aware are possible, let alone should they be having these discussions. And that's where we really need to push the envelope. And that is the point of this call and the calls we do, right? To push the envelope for innovation.
Good point. Joel, could you explain it like I'm 5 here? When it comes to supply chain and NFTs and blockchain, why do we need the supply chain to live within the blockchain? Where's the problem?
Yeah, so the problem, and we listed this out really well in our Navy white paper. It's on Elsevier. It's in a blockchain journal. It was peer reviewed. So is the first Navy white paper that was done with blockchain, and we did it with Boeing and several other companies, ITAMCO included. And what that was really focused on is all these different companies, the ERP system is their system of record. So every company has an enterprise resource planning, and that's where their item master lives. And if you think of an item master is the listing. It is the ERC 721, and it has that token ID, the UNT 256. It's got that serialized ID, and for every item that is in their inventory. But when I want to transfer that item from whether it goes to Navy or it goes from ITAMCO to Boeing to Navy for a final product, it cannot. With blockchain, it cannot live in multiple states. It can't be in Navy's inventory, it can't be in Boeing's inventory, and it can't be in ITAMCO's inventory all at the same time. With blockchain, just like Bitcoin, just like Ethereum, it literally transfers, and everybody knows that it's been transferred, and there's a way to, you can immediately account for that. So that's what it does. Yeah.
So with the previous legacy system, you maybe could have inventory showing up in one person's inventory and another inventory at the same time because there's not one universal record keeping. Got you.
Exactly. And if it doesn't show up at Navy or DLA or all these other agencies we're working with in Boeing, they'll just order it again. They literally just order it again, and then all of a sudden, instead of 5 showing up, they have 10 that end up showing up. But the first 5 show up before the last 5 they just ordered. So anyway,
maybe this is why
problem.
The United States has the defense budget that we have, as we're just spending 5 times over on every piece of equipment.
It's readiness. So they call that's the key word they call is readiness, and they use that to go, hey, we got to be ready to act. And if they don't have that component, people could die. So that's that readiness capability. But readiness doesn't necessarily mean that there's ways to solve some of these issues, and that's what we've been working on.
Okay. This is a little more topical to crypto. 2 weeks ago, the Chinese government gave away 15 million digital yuan to 130,000 residents of Shenzhen, equaling roughly $2.3 million. The digital yuan can be used at nearly 5,000 stores with no minimum purchase required. Do you guys see China leading the pack in the crypto space when it comes to sovereign involvement in crypto payments in general? And do you think other westernized nations are behind the curve when it comes to blockchain progress? Michael, I'll let you answer this one.
Yes and no. So the example you gave is a great sentiment that shows value in trying to put a new technology to use immediately. But what I think is really important and what the industry has lacked since its inception is uniform regulation. So I think there's several governments that are really bucking up and getting ready and realising this isn't going away, and we need more than sandpits with test licenses. Australia's a great example. Singapore is. Then you've got the various minnows around the world who have been developing regulations specific for crypto, which is great, but this is what we need in the larger economies. Very clear, concise regulations, similar to what you have for securities law. There's very few grey areas regarding how you would issue a token, the types of disclosure. US is a great example, right? 144A and Reg S disclosure requirements for bonds. It's very clear. So when you think about what's being issued now in new projects, this sort of regulation is really critical to pull crypto into the mainstream and to be recommended by advisors for clients to buy things like this. That really steps up wallet holders. There needs to be uniform regulation. So to your question, yes, it's great. It's a great step China's doing because I think we all would love to see national currencies that are digitized. So absolutely.
Do you think that's
global?
Do you think that's the future, Michael?
Yep.
Do you think that sovereign CBDCs? Do you think every nation will eventually have their own CBDC that they get to have some sense of agency over?
I suspect so, because if you look at the functions of monetary policy, you have an amount of float on issue, and they can buy some back and burn it essentially, or they can mint more. Blockchain typically allows for those functions. So I see no reason why it couldn't be deployed as a stable coin issued by the government rather than, a bucket of money sitting in trust with a bank issued by a project. The technology is there. It suits the monetary tools that governments typically apply to monetary policy. So yes.
With inflation so high right now and central banks overstimulating for the last 2 years, do you see this public distrust in centralized banks and sovereign, people who print the money? Do you see people losing trust with them on a global scale? Because my question would be, why would people want to resort to using their country's CBDC when they could use a blockchain stablecoin like DAI that has more of an algorithmic value to it? Do you see people losing trust with countries and just using a crypto native currency for their payments, or do you see them actually adopting a CBDC?
Just two comments. Not really, because at the end of the day, you need to buy in and buy out of these, crypto-centric stablecoins. So there's a reference point back to what they're taking home. Paying rent, things like that on the ground. I can see rent being paid on the ground by a government-approved and issued coin. I can't see it necessarily being paid in DAI. Now, I know there's plenty of examples, especially in Europe, people paying for real estate in Bitcoin and everything. So I could well be wrong. But typically there is a reference point to enter and exit. I don't think you'll necessarily get someone having 100% of their expenditure in DAI or Tether or whatever you want to talk about. So I think they will need an exit point for some, and then if there's a inflation, multiplying or minimising effect, you live with the same issue. So I suspect you'll see digital currencies which are subject to the same inflation and deflation measures that the printed currency is. I think there'll be a place for crypto-centric stuff like DAI, for instance. Will it replace? No, I don't think so. I think they'll live in tandem.
Do you see a world where we eventually have a cashless society where we tangibly don't use hard currency anymore, that we're fully digital, even with the CBDC?
I live in Australia today. I haven't seen printed notes in 5 years since COVID, which is great because things like having your credit card on your phone. Yeah, I got rid of my wallet. I have no need for it. But again, what we are talking about is a first world, heavily banked country where every single thing I need to purchase, without exception, is available on credit card. That does not exist in every country. So yes, I can absolutely see a physical cashless environment. Because we largely have them today in Australia, and I'm sure it applies elsewhere. Where the banks aren't there needs to be something in lieu of those banks. The obvious answer is crypto.
Good point. Good point. Joel, do you have anything to add into that?
Yeah, I think just going back to the China, they have the BSN, which is their national blockchain network. They're starting to do NFTs. They're going to be able to control their entire supply chain. They're going to onboard everybody. I mean, it's crazy. So that's where you have like a totalitarian government that can control everything and use distributed ledger technology to do that. The U.S. is going to be different because we're going to leverage. Obviously, it's very capitalistic, multiple chains. There's going to be, it's going to be a lot more, but they're definitely a step ahead of us, and I think from a national security standpoint, really need to start thinking about okay, they will be able to immediately react quicker because they can control their entire supply chain to do different things that we don't necessarily have those kind of reactionary capabilities with smart contracts and being able to get all that, and handling information and money joined together is really powerful, and you can do that with smart contracts.
Do you feel like that's the biggest upside is reaction time, or would it be trust and immutability? To your opinion?
I think it's all those, because you can, with trust and immutability, bring speed because it's going to happen. So, and then I think to the other point about digitalized CBDCs and all this other stuff that's going on, I think that you've already seen some of this, like with El Salvador, Bitcoin is a currency. I've seen several other countries come out that they're accepting that as currency. And so, to Michael's point, we live in a first world problem where it's like, oh, I have a stable dollar, Aussies have a staple, AUSD. So there's first world problems, but then there's second world problems where their money is you've seen the pictures where it's like a pile of cash and it's only worth $1 or something in fiat. So it's just That's and what's crazy is if you think about Bitcoin, it's like digital, and you see like the stack of fiat dollars. It's like that represents. So now you're kind of seeing like some major inflationary stuff going on. So I think that there's not going to just be one, to Michael's point, but there will be capabilities for different and multinational companies can bring this about because they could pay their in stable coins. They could use USDC to circles to pay people out. I mean, if Amazon, as they're starting to accept crypto, people could, if they're paid in crypto and they buy in crypto, and you're buying all your food and you're having your deliveries done, and that's just a matter of time before I think real estate or other places start looking at that too. But anyway, yeah, it's a whole money, like to Michael's point, like that's what Goldman Sachs is like amazing at. Like they could go in there and figure out like all this stuff and see how it's all going to interconnect.
So, Michael, do you see a situation with Goldman Sachs in the next year or two where they fully embrace crypto rails and crypto solutions, or do you think we're still years away from that sort of scenario?
I think we are years away. I'm certain they've got their development labs. We always joked at Goldman's is a tech firm, not an investment bank. The amount of technology staff they have is extraordinary, and they do fantastic work with what they come up with. I'm quite certain they'll be working on these things. It'll be a matter of when they want to go to market. They led with, OTC risk on this. I think it was run out of the securities division. I think they call it global markets these days. There's certain regulations where they can't hold certain types of digital assets, and they need to be held by custodians.
What would some of those assets be that they would need to be held by custodians rather than having self-custody of?
Their banking license doesn't allow for it. So they need an onshore custodian to hold the actual digital asset, and then it's held for them, and they wear the exposure on swap. So the consequence of all of that is it's not an integrated offering. They rely on third parties to pull all this together. I think you'll find as regulation becomes more mainstreamed and more debated in the US, and more technologists are involved, because often it's policymakers who get a general idea and they say, well, what does this look a lot like? Well, it looks like shares, or it looks like, credit notes. So let's just make the regulations similar. And of course, because of how the technology works, that sort of regulation you can't just jam it on. And I think once you go through the iterations and you allow for things such as direct custody, and banks and investors that have merchant banking licenses, for instance, can hold these directly on behalf of clients instead of prop trading accounts. We're getting quite nuanced, but suffice to say the regulations aren't right there for how I'm sure they would love to run their business. Once they do get there, yes, I do think that they will go all out. They're all about efficiency and interoperability with the other banks for settlements. The dark pools where equities are traded. You can imagine immediate settlement is something that's quite appealing. So yes, I do. I think regulation again will toe the line here. I'm certain the willingness is there.
If you were to look to the future and just take a guess, how many years away do you think we are from having meaningful regulation that accounts for those problems?
5, maybe. I'd love to say it's 9 months, but not. You will find iterations. There'll be sandboxes. There will be testing. But again, the sandboxes are built by folks who come from either policy or they come from banks, not from the wild west of crypto 10 years ago, who really knows what's going to work and what's not going to work. That's how it is. So you find they put regulation in, then there's big small
Joel,
and commitments.
Oh,
takes forever.
Sorry to cut you off, Michael. It's a little spotty for me. But Joel, when it comes to regulation for Simba, where's the hang-up with what regulations need to be put in place for your chain to really do all that it's set up to do? Is there any pushback, or is there any innovation that needs to happen within regulation, or what's that look like for you guys?
Yeah, I think they're still not. I mean, they're getting more clarity on crypto, but I think NFTs are still not. There's not a whole lot of clarity yet on that. So that's still NFTs are very and that's a smart contract. So you can dive down into smart contracts, which is a whole huge thing. NFT is just a subset of that. It gets really complicated. And to Michael's point, so we really work with a lot of institutions. So to keep, we're talking with a lot of different banking groups that have those licenses, so that that we're kind of staying clear of that, and the AML and the KYC and all that stuff is with them, and so that's really, and at the end of the day, we want to live in the Wild West, but the reality is most of the consumers need to be protected. So we have to allow regulation to let work with regulators to for the mass adoption to happen. The consumer has to be protected.
So if you guys, maybe this is a little bit off topic, but if you were to read the tea leaves with the Ripple SEC case, where do you think the outcome of that is going, and how do you think it affects regulation in general? Michael, do you want to go ahead on that one?
I won't speculate to the outcome of the case, but what I will say is that it makes it clear for the industry that the regulators are watching. They want to take it seriously, which is a great thing, because it means the government thinks this is a serious thing. This isn't just some kids doing technology in the backwaters. They are taking this seriously, so I think it is a great sign, firstly. Where the case gets to, again, I won't speculate, but what it shows is that regulators believe things need to be done in a certain way, which is similar to I keep drawing back to securities law, but to firm regulation for the sake of protecting investors. Now, not going into the ins and the outs and who did what and the accusations, the sooner we have defined regulation, then the sooner we have rules that people know they need to play by, shall we say. So I think it's a necessary and it is an important thing to be happening. No one likes to see legal action, of course, but I think in the long term it will benefit the industry, absolutely.
I have one more question probably to fit in here. There's a lot of talk about how energy-intensive blockchain mining is, and it's been casting a negative light on cryptocurrencies. When it comes to proof of stake and proof of work, is there a world where all blockchains can become proof of stake while mitigating the downside risk of the blockchain trilemma of security, decentralization, and speed? Joel, what do you think? I know. I think we still have years away before, if Bitcoin will ever go to a proof of stake. Let's let Ethereum get there. They're still not there. So I think they're doing a lot of testing with ghost nodes and things like that. But I feel like that, Bitcoin's going to be around for quite a while and as proof of work. And I know there's a lot of companies that are really focusing on using solar power and renewable energy to mine and do those different things, and people want to invest in that. So I think the free market let's let the free market do what it does. It knows it's worked pretty well. So Michael, do you see a world where eventually all of our Bitcoins are being mined via solar, wind, hydro, geothermal?
Yep. I agree with Joel's sentiment. I don't think it even needs to go to proof of stake. I think proof of work is just fine, especially with the legacy chains. They work just fine. Now, carbon emissions have become commercialised these days. People buy carbon credits. People are uncomfortable with their own impact on the environment. I don't see any difference between your willingness to hop on a plane and you pay carbon offset versus you're burning energy for the transacting you do. One could imagine when you've an add-on to a wallet, or as these things become offered by financial institutions, when you hit transact, do you want your energy use off screen 100% carbon offset? The great thing is it's pretty simple to measure how much energy would have been used for that transaction. So it's a specific number of carbon you could buy back, for instance. I think the free market and people's willingness to deal with this is a more straightforward, simple, and probably innovative thing than trying to jam a legacy system across to a new proof of stake style, and the hassle that creates, and who's staking all these coins on Bitcoin to validate master nodes. It's so dispersed, and the big holders aren't going to show their hand, are they? So I think the realities are people's interest in saving the environment will be commercialized. There'll be offset buttons to click, and you pay a little bit more, things like that.
All right, we have just a few minutes left before we gotta say goodbye. Joel, quick 1 minute. What should your community be on the lookout for Simba Chain in the coming year? What exciting updates do you have around the corner? Do you have any teasers to leave us with?
Yeah, I think just keep looking for more adoption, massive UI, UX capabilities. So I think we're going to lead the way in adoption for blockchain. We're already doing this. We're in 35 different universities, teaching them NFTs, using Simba for all those different things. We're in enterprise, we're in government. So we're across the gamut. And we have a marketplace, simbamarket.com, where people can really get into using just fiat for buying NFTs. So anyway, lots of great things, and that just more of that will be coming.
Awesome. Michael, same question for you. Is there any exciting updates, or I know you don't want to talk about anything before the ink dries, but is there any hints or teasers you could leave the Unido community with that we could look forward to?
The two things I will say is everyone knows EP's launching imminently. That remains on the same timeline as described. So taking that and corporatizing crypto is the mission for the rest of the year. Keep your eyes peeled on the Insto product for new updates as, frankly, the conversations remain hot with institutions. Despite what's happening with the Bitcoin price, institutions move slowly when they do product adoption. They're not putting cold water on their plans. The conversations in the background are happening, and these things will filter through as it relates to Unido Insto as well.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, and this was an awesome conversation. So I look forward to the community seeing this, and thank you again so much. It was awesome.